Sorry, I just hit that. Go ahead, Val.
uh, like sales was driving CSMs nuts, with constant, like not constant because you don't need references constantly, but what felt like constant DMs, messages in their group channels, and CSMs were always like, and the questions are like, hey, I need someone who switched from this competitor platform, and the CSMs are like, don't you have that information? You know, like isn't that something that you all have? And we have enough in our heads all the time with all of our accounts. We can't possibly keep all their former platforms in mind especially once the migration's done and gone. It's like, okay, remove that file and shred it, and now I'll put a new piece of information in my head. So I think like leveraging the leadership of those CSM teams, who just like, in my case, it's Kevin, and Kevin was like, this can't happen anymore, and went to his leadership and said, we need someone to manage a reference program, and it makes sense for, obviously he and I had already talked about it. It makes sense for advocacy to do this. They are building out an advocacy program anyways. They are owning cabs. Like, it's a natural fit. And so that was how we like got the budget and the buy-in from senior leadership to actually have the program. It wasn't me going and saying like, I want to do this thing and I need however much money for a platform, but it was other teams saying, this is taking up too much of our time, and that time equals money, and that money can be spent on something else.
That's super helpful. And did you end up with a tool that's reference program only, or is it part of an advocacy program?
No, so that's our like internal, it's our Trojan horse. So we're using SLAT 5 because it does so many other things outside of references. We're calling it a reference program internally, like to the rest of the company. But to each other, I have a team of 2. So to each other, we're calling it the advocacy program. And by the end of this year, it will be an advocacy program according to everyone else at Klaviyo. But right now it's like, it's the reference program. And that's what we're building, is a reference program. And I mean, we have a $2 million deal that's going to close next week because of a reference, which will instantly pay for the software that they already invested in, right? So like one deal can show the value of the investment.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
That is really awesome.
We did not get a budget at ours, so I couldn't convince them to spend any money to utilize any tools that we didn't already have. So we're still jerry-rigging a bunch of information via Salesforce.
Damn. Yeah, they wouldn't give us budget either.
And I'm kind of in the boat. So I worked at Teradata for many years. I won't say how many. And I'm in a new company where they already selected a reference management system when I got here, which was great. It was a Reference Edge, which is what I used at Teradata. However, we used it, like we got a lot of budget to use it there because we were a very established reference program. It is, some of you may or may not know, Reference Edge requires a license for each user, so obviously you need more budget. So we only have enough licenses really for a select number of folks. So we're right now dividing it up and giving the marketing folks licenses, and the sales folks won't have a license. And I'm trying to make that case like we need them to all use it, because it's it's not best practice for submissions coming in one way from marketing versus sales, etc. But again, I'm going to have to probably look at end of next year and by tracking our revenue, saying, we were able to support this many deals, revenue influence, to make my case for more budget for the licenses for sales. So it's a little bit frustrating right now, but hopefully we'll get there.
Do we have several people, or do we think this is a common thing right now for companies to be comparing the tools and, looking, since budgets have been set and stuff? Does that seem like a trend that would be happening right now?
Yeah, vendor consolidation is definitely happening across the board.
Yeah, that happened with me. We lost Gong, which I absolutely love, and I'm very sad that we don't have it anymore.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I know I talked to a couple other people in the community just today that are thinking about different tools. So we do have 2 vendors on right now, but they're people too, so that's okay. They can answer questions, but I think it's really interesting to hear from each other. And of course, Caitlin's here from G2 and has her own insights, but yeah, ask questions if it helps. Rebecca, do you have any specific use cases other than the references that you want to cover?
I have so many topics, but if other people have urgent things that they're working on, happy to share the floor.
I actually have a question for everyone in regard that runs reference programs, and that's, I guess maybe should put this in the Slack so you can just kind of, everyone can vote on a poll maybe, but I'm kind of wondering like average SLA on getting a reference connected back to a salesperson, because obviously sales wants it yesterday and that's humanly impossible, and it typically, in my experience, it's taking at least a few days between like finding the right reference and then doing the outreach either via the CSM or directly. And obviously we are not that person's #1 priority in their inbox. So
I'm supporting a few enterprise clients right now with their reference request processes, so I can give you sort of some insight into a few companies.
yeah.
Mostly across the board, the sort of statement is 10 days, 10 business days. And that includes from the time that the salesperson submits the request to the time that they're connected with the references contact information. And the sort of desk drawer statement that we keep to justify that is that we have to respect the time it takes for customers to get back to you.
Yeah.
Because it's urgent for every salesperson, even if their deal is like worth $0, but it's never urgent for the customer who's doing you a favor,
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
So I think usually when it comes to doing your sort of internal outreach, in these systems, there's that I work with, and we do an internal outreach to the account team and basically get a green light. And then from there, we move to contacting directly with the account team on copy the reference contact themselves. And so when you think about the time that it takes an average person to respond to an email, whether they work for the company or they're a customer of the company, you know, you want to give a few days leeway. And also when you're advertising those SLAs, you cut down, if you're saying 10 business days, you're cutting down on the I need a reference tomorrow.
Yeah, that's really good. We're running a training for the GTM team on the end of January on the program. So being upfront about SLAs, and I'm sure you get a lot of gripes about that number 10. That's two-digit number up front.
But also like stepping back and saying, you know, we just really respect our customers' time and the time that it takes for our customers to get back to us. You know, really harping on that tends to help, because it's hard for the salesperson or whoever's requesting the reference. It's hard for them to say, well, I don't.
Right.
To that.
Yeah, I had a salesperson submit a reference request on Friday the 30th. And then on Tuesday the 3rd was like, hey, where's my reference?
Yikes.
That's, yeah, over the holidays is like even longer.
Yeah. Most of the clients that I support, just for your reference, for over the holidays, they actually shut down their reference program from usually like the 22nd until the like 5th or something like that. Yeah. And they communicate that well in advance to their sales teams, so that their sales teams know if they're going to have a deal that's closing in that window, that they need to submit a request well in advance of that time.
Smart.
When I was at Demand Base, we had somebody that was running the reference program. Like we worked together, but she did all the finding and placing, and it was usually within a couple of business days that we had them connected. but that was her entire job.
Right.
So
That's the other
that
piece
would
of the
not
puzzle is
be
like
normal.
the SLA includes all the other activities that the team does. We don't have a full-time reference manager.
Yeah, I mean, and it depends too on like what processes you have in place. Like if you have some kind of, maybe just like there's a list where they can pick some people out of it. I think it varies based on the company and your resources, but I mean, 5 to 10 days that's good too. Especially like if you are really getting people to understand like that they have to plan it. They can't just jump on you at any moment. Which is probably a bit harder than having them just request it through you, but you know, putting those expectations in place.
Yep.
I've also heard the idea of like group reference calls, like bringing on a few prospects with one customer.
Yeah.
Curious if anyone's actually done that and how it's gone.
Leslie's talked about those, I think.
Yeah, I've actually did those for probably about 15 years at Teradata, and they were very successful. That's something I'm actually trying to implement here at BMC. It's just a much slower process because they haven't had a reference program for 5 years, a formal one. So again, it's trying to really focus on our objectives, and I feel like more of our infrastructure and the framework of our program and the branding, that's kind of getting set up now, but I hope to implement our first customer roundtable by, I would say, the end of March or April, because I think that would really help support our sponsorship with sales, and not just seeing us as like tactical folks, but more strategic in growing the company.
I echo what Maria said. I've had a lot of success with that style of reference, and I actually, it's my preferred, and it's what I will push for every time, especially if you're kind of either new to a reference program, new to an advocacy program, and you just don't have that big base of customers to draw from. It's a really smart way to maximize the investment in customers and minimize the lift.
Are you saying that like maybe you did that from the beginning as kind of a way to manage all of the ad hoc requests? Like you're like, okay, well, we'll just get people together to do some of these group ones?
Kind of a loaded question, Mary.
Okay, never
Previously, when my world was very focused on references, it was an evolution. Started with the one-to-one, and then kind of realized this is such a time suck, and I don't even have to go into the laundry list. Everybody here knows what some of the reasons are, and then moved to that one-to-many kind of situation. Now I'm in a position where it's not as much of a focus, but also I just think it's smarter. So I'm going to use that. I use that from the get-go, that's the best practice, to go one-to-many.
And has anybody done video like testimonials that they keep and use as assets, or does that not go over well?
I
Those
mean,
are
I'm starting
awesome.
that with my customer of the month. So we'll keep the asset. The YTI question comes up as the thing that we're going to save and make it available to sales on demand.
I think they're the best for early stages, especially because sales who urgently need a reference request usually want to reference at like very early in the sales opportunity where you don't want to bug a customer. So why not give them access to some prompts from a previously recorded call? I think they're awesome.
We're doing that. We're doing it via slot 5, but you could easily do it with any like landing page, or even with if you can self-serve into your own website. But we're calling them like customer story battle cards. So we're starting with our competitors, and we have these, like sales has these battle cards they use all the time of stats and data and information on the products. So, what's the same, what's different, all that stuff. But we're kind of taking the customer story approach of finding customers, either switchers or people who chose us over that competitor, and doing those quick testimonial videos and then putting them all on a page that answer specific questions about that platform or about that, choice. So hopefully, I mean, I don't have any data on it yet, but we're going to start with our top 3 competitors and then put those out in the world and see what we get back.
Yeah, same here. We use videos, but I agree it's typically earlier in the process a lot of times. And I just tend to think for those group reference calls too, there, especially when the deal is closing within a few weeks, those can make or break a deal. So there's nothing that beats that kind of interactive discussion.
Maria, with those group calls, is that something that's like, every Wednesday at 1 or something like that? Or are you setting it up for specific groups of people?
No, I mean, I would love to be that kind of prescriptive and be able to do that, but it's all based on customer schedules. So typically, again, I haven't implemented one at BMC yet, but typically how I did it at Teradata, we would identify like what were heavy requests, like topics. And obviously they were always about cloud and against competitors. So we would always try to get our large customers. Like right before I left last year, my last one in May was with American Airlines, hosted it. And it took us like 2 years to get them to host one. And there were like 85 people on there because they also let analysts who are under NDA just listen in. So that was a good thing too. It wasn't just like a few prospects or customers. We actually had a very large audience. And then it's, again, it can be like, I always tell them, like, it can be as formal as you want it or as informal as you want it. You can share a presentation or you can just speak. Like, I want it to be easy for that customer to talk. And sometimes like they can't show slides because they have to get approval from their company. And I always, risk canceling the call sometimes, whereas other companies don't have a problem and the customer sharing a presentation. So it's really up to them. So typically what we did there was we would do like one big one, probably once a quarter or twice a quarter, where we would, when I say one big one, like that's when they would allow listen in folks. So there might not be prospects and customers who are actually ready to ask questions, but it would like spark conversations in their heads and leads to one-to-ones. Whereas typically the prospects and customers in what we call discussion mode and who were expected to ask questions had deals closing soon. And we had to make it very clear to them too. There were just a few calls, I'd say, over that course of 15 years that I wouldn't say went poorly, but there should have been more discussion. So I found myself in the last few years really preparing people who were actually in active mode, saying you need to send us kind of questions in advance so we can prepare the customer. Realize you will have a typically 8 to 10 minute slot to ask questions. So they knew, and they weren't like, oh, we don't have questions. Because the beauty is too, they learn from each other's questions, like company A learns from B and B learns from C. So it's expected to be like a really good dialogue. So that was kind of the beauty of those calls.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, Alexi, I agree. Like the people being on the calls it's like a virtual ABM event in some ways.
Yeah, I actually met with my field marketing folks yesterday. Some of the demand gen team were on there, but I was actually explaining to them because I had that in my objectives. We're just actually now going into our Q4, so we're not calendar year. So that's a bit different too. So I was telling them ideally by our first quarter, our next fiscal year, I really want to implement those. And they thought they were a great idea because it actually takes some work off their plate too and helps drive demand. So I really hope we can pull it off soon because I think it's something that's doesn't cost a lot of money and you can get a lot of bang for the buck.
Yeah.
And Maria, are you at a smaller company now or a bigger company?
No,
than you
I actually
were
about
at
the same
before?
size. I'm a BMC software. So it might be
Okay.
just a little smaller, but still, technology focused. It's again, Teradata, we had a reference program established since 2001. It was strong and it was well known, and we did a lot of really innovative things. But this time, BMC doesn't have a program right now. So that's the reason why I was hired, is to create one. And there's been a lot of change in management. A lot of budgeting changes, obviously, and just in general. So it's kind of slower than I would have hoped, but we are hopefully, fingers crossed, going to launch our official one in March or April. So I'm excited about that.
Congrats, Maria.
Great.
I hope.
Awesome. I will comment too, and Lexi, thank you, because you brought it up. But I lean on that too, that networking opportunity, because for the customers that are willing to reference, be advocates, I try to make it as much of a mutually beneficial experience. And that's exactly how I position it with the group, reference calls, that yes, I'm leaning on you and I'm asking you to answer questions and things like that. But really everybody gets something. And most of the time they're very interested in that aspect because they're building their network, their professional network, and connecting with people that they might not otherwise connect with.
Yeah.
That's what I said this week. Sam Shepler posted that nobody likes reference calls. And I was like, hey, I've had a lot of customers who like doing reference calls. They like getting on and talking and sharing their opinion. So
I mean, I actually completely agree, Mary. I know lots of people who love reference calls. I think there's a lot of art and technique in knowing how to advertise the opportunity, and all of that is like baked into how to build the relationship as well with the actual advocate themselves. But it's also one of the reasons that, like, especially with sort of new reference programs, when we're sort of advising on the establishment of them, that my team sort of defaults away from automatic gifting or like gift cards or that sort of thing. Because if you have the opportunity to thank them and sort of like surprise and delight with future advocacy opportunities, you're continuing to build that relationship and get a better sense of what they are after as an advocate, as an individual versus their company. Like there's always a place for gifting and gift cards and all of that, but also just knowing that the person you're speaking to is a human who has like career interests and growth on their mind for their personal position, you can really sort of match make that opportunity.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the whole debate on, whether to like always have rewards, or because then that makes it transactional, or if you should always do surprise and delight. And I kind of like a mix of both, because I like to know that they're going to be rewarded, but on the other hand, it can become very, I give you this, you do this type of thing.
Yeah.
Do you have another topic, Rebecca?
I do. I could drop off in like 5 minutes. I'm being a nice mother and pick my son up because it is snowing here in Boston. I don't know if anyone else is in Boston. The other question I had, again, I don't know how relevant it is to folks, is community. Wondering how many other folks here have community for customers, so not open to prospects, but have customer community in your world, and how you started building community if you didn't have budget to buy a tool.
To buy a platform, did you say?
Yeah, like to buy a platform. Yeah. So like one of the ideas is like we should start on Slack, and then once we prove the value of the community, buy a platform. And
Yeah.
I have some concerns about that approach, and I'm curious if anybody else has done that, and if it worked well or worked poorly, or how else you approached building community if you did not have the budget or a person to run it, and it was just one of the 35 million things on your list for customer marketing.
Well, there's one thing that I want to point out, that so Fever Bee is one of like the top consulting firms, I guess you would call, in online community, and they've been with all over the place. And Richard Millington put out a post this week about how online forums aren't as not popular, but like they're not the de facto choice as they used to be. And for a while I've been saying, be on a platform that your people are on. If it's B2B tech, it's hard to find people that aren't on Slack, but you know, there is the occasional Allison. Did she drop off? She must have dropped off. But like some people can't, but it's really a major platform for a lot of people in B2B tech. So he talked about how to choose the best platform, because just going with vanilla or Khoros or anything like that is not a guaranteed way to succeed. It's getting harder to get people to build those online platforms, those forums out with their content, when it can be a lot easier to hop into Slack and leave a quick message. So there's that to think about. And I've done this with quite a few companies where it's starting out small. And even if I join a company that already has a community or they're starting to build a community on their website, I've used Slack to get it jump started and start somewhere that is easy to get people to engage. They kind of know all of the things to do. And I know Leslie from Sandoso has her community on Slack as well. And there are a lot of tools now that you can use as a CRM or to like track engagement and things like that. So I just wanted to hop in with that answer.
Mariette, do you have, you mentioned the gentleman, I'm sorry, was it Robert?
Richard Millington,
Richard.
he's the guy behind Feverbee.
Okay, I need to look that up. So I'm in an interesting situation because prior to when I arrived, they actually purchased like 3 different platforms prior to even launching the advocacy or framework for the advocacy program. So Reference Edge, they also purchased Higher Logic for the community, and then another gifting platform. But we were hoping, I just couldn't understand why they purchased Higher Logic. I didn't think it was a great decision. And I thought prior to Christmas, we were actually going to be able to no longer, like, we haven't launched it. Like, they've had the contract, but there was some misunderstanding too with what we were going to be given and what was the actual support from Higher Logic. And I was just told we actually are going to have to use Higher Logic going forward. And I'm trying to I'm trying to tell my boss, like, it requires like a full-time person to manage this community. Like, it's just not like about getting on there and posting things one time. Like, it's really interactive. And then we're going to have different, sets of personas within our advocacy group. And like, we just can't be using this because we signed a contract. But I don't know. So hearing your insights too, I want to read Richard's work. So I'm going to look him up.
Well, Maria, what was the reaction when you said, hey, by the way, like, this is a full-time job and we don't have somebody hired to do this?
So,
what was the reaction?
I mean, it was a conversation that's been happening kind of over and over again. And I've been like, I was so stressed out about it when I started, because I was like, we don't have enough resources on our team to do this. And I don't think my boss understands the degree in which you have to actually put into a community, not to mention the fact that a lot of that too is like curated content, which there's a cost factor. So I reminded him that yesterday, and he did say, well, perhaps we could get a contractor, but I'm not sure that's going to fly, because it's we've been very fortunate. We haven't had any layoffs, like super fortunate, knock on wood. I just don't know if we'll get the approval for headcount for that. And I personally don't knowing our customers and what I know about them now, I don't think it's a good strategy to proceed with. But I kind of have to I don't want to sound negative about it, but it's going to be overwhelming for my team, on top of launching a new advocacy program, a new brand. Like, we have, we're launching a rewards program in conjunction with that. That's going to be like a largely manual process, because we don't have my old company, we have an external website to manage that. And that's a cost factor. And I'm not getting that. So, we're trying to do too much too soon. And I certainly want to.
What?
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I just want to ask real quick, what is the goal that they're trying to reach with having Higher Logic as a community for the customers?
So initially it was, they wanted to focus just on C-suite and C-1. Like that was their intent in building a program when I came aboard, but that's kind of morphed. I'm actually, ironically, my old CMO came aboard to be my new CMO about 2 months after I started. And he and I share the same vision of like, you know, a large part of the advocates should be users. So we're obviously identifying C-suite, C-1, kind of those senior execs and users. And, you know, if you do build community too, you have to think about all those different personas in there. But again, I don't think they had a well thought out strategy to use it, because that's one of the questions. And I don't, if there's anyone from Higher Logic on the calls, they're not, right?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay, I'm just making sure, like so I don't want to sound like negative to Higher Logic. I'm sure it's a great platform, but my question to them too, when we have these calls with them, can you give me any of your customers that I can speak with who are managing communities for C-suite? And they could not give me one customer. So that tells me right there, it was kind of a poor choice for a platform. Yet we're in this deal, but should we, you know, I don't think we should be using it just because we paid the money. Like eventually the contract will expire and we'll either have to go forward or cancel it. And that's not a good strategy either. And it also conflicts. I mean, IT was in agreement with me too, because they're like, well, we already have a user community. So you're conflicting with that as well. So lots of discussion. I just, you know, I don't want everything to be coming from me in terms of what I think. Like I'm trying to like also, you know, show him like research behind some of the things I'm saying, to say this is what we need to do, this is best practice. But I'm really just, when it came up again this week about Higher Logic, I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we have to, like, I really don't honestly think we can undertake this. So it's going to be a real challenge for our team.
If they are trying to build a community with for the C-suite on Higher Logic, I cannot imagine how it's going to be successful.
I 110% agree with you.
There's just,
yeah,
to be able to give, you know, community is not just something that lives in the discussions anymore in those forums. It's in your customer programs. It's in the way you connect customers on calls like these and stuff. And like that call that I'm doing next week, for anybody that's been in customer marketing for 6 years or more, like you have to make sure that you're going to have value on those calls, or they're not going to show up. They're going to show up for a community that they don't know if there's going to be decent value in participating on a forum like Higher Logic. Pavilion's a little different, but they've been around so long, and they started with such a, you know, a tight group of people. It's more advanced, and you're going to hit more of those C-suite people, but it's not going to be effective. I can't imagine how that would be effective. I know that Richard has done some studies and stuff where he's gone over the different types of people that will participate in different types of community activities. I'll have to go back and see if I can find that, because I read all of his work. But yeah, I'd be happy to share any of that with you.
Yeah, and I'll Google his name too. I 110% agree with you. I mean, that's a whole nother initiative in itself, and I just think it was a poor decision. So again, that's kind of the challenge I'm facing, and really trying to get us to like focus. Like we have to focus, because we're trying to do so much and we're not going to be successful. We try to do too many things.
Yeah, I mean, my approach to advocacy and customer marketing comes from my community background, and it really is just more community management. There's a community management internally to get people to come together and collaborate to give these resources and our time and effort and all of that. And then there's the community of either your customers that you will be providing value to so that they join your program, or the smaller group of the advocacy members, because a lot of them eventually want to have some kind of, meetups, or they want to connect with other people. So it's having that group mindset, and you have to keep that in mind. Like, one, with community, they say if you're trying to do more than 5 things, then you're not going to be successful doing it, because you're just all over the place. You've got to focus on the things that are really going to drive your goals and help you hit those numbers that you need to hit while providing value. And being all over the place with extra platforms isn't going to help. Now, I do like Influitive because I think it gives you those discussion forums, and then it gives you the added kind of gamification that you don't get in most other communities. As far as like the advocacy points are different, you can do the challenges and those things, but not everybody goes with Influitive for that. So
Yeah, and that's one they looked at too when they chose Reference Edge. And again, it's a little bit different. But at the time, they weren't looking at implementing a rewards program either. And it's, of course, Reference Edge can record all the points and everything, because I did that very successfully. But we had, like I mentioned, an external website, a Teradata, where the customers went to redeem. So it was easy, and it was integrated with Salesforce and Reference Edge, and we don't have that. So that's another thing. Again, like manually, my team will be helping with those redemptions. So I think we're not going to set ourselves up for success if we're trying to do too many things.
right. Yeah, I used Influitive with Reference Edge, so I don't even know how Influitive does the reference part of their program. Which isn't a question I was going to ask other people on this call, even though we've had several drop off by now. It's just, I'm wondering who's used multiple products in our space. So, I've used Reference Edge, I've used Influitive, I've used CrowdVocate /base. I'm looking for others who have used multiple products as well. So either on this call or afterwards, just ping me. I always like to know, just so I can send other people your way in the future.
And I just want to jump in here. I am going through the whole making a business case to get a reference program set up. And I'm looking into software. So I was wondering if anybody used SLAP 5 or base, I guess, now.
Well, somebody has. I know Val was saying that they use SLAP 5. And I've used CrowdVocate. There might be, has anybody else on here used CrowdVocate?
Yeah, I used it at Gainsight, and I would not recommend them. I know this is recorded, so if Mary can ever edit that out somehow, but I would not recommend them. I can talk more about it offline though.
Okay, thank you so
I'm
much.
also happy to talk with you, Justine. I've talked with quite a few people in the community, but as a customer marketing consultant, one of my jobs is to sort of keep my finger on the pulse of everything that's happening in terms of the tools. And one of the things we help lots of clients with is figuring out what the best platform is for them. But yeah, you've got 2 good resources in here right now with Allison from Reference Edge and Andrew from Orca.
And I've used RO Innovations and also CrowdVocate.
And what's your experience with those 2 platforms, Hope?
Well, we moved from RO Innovations because no one liked it and no one used it. And CrowdVocate, for the past year, I've been trying to launch it, and we've had some issues. I'd be glad to talk to someone offline about it.
How about SLAP 5 then? Has anybody, I think Val used it. How's your experience with SLAP 5 so far?
I think Val hopped off. She had another
she did,
call, but
okay.
she is always getting on different calls. So I'll keep an eye out for whatever next call she's going to be on, or when she's around, and I'll ask her. I don't know what else anybody else has used.
And I think Wendy, you
Oh,
said use some Slap 5, right?
Unmute myself. Yeah, I've used Slap 5, but I was really with them in the earlier years when they were kind of first starting out. And it was good. I mean, there was a lot of great potential. I haven't seen it since. I know they've got a lot of new stuff that they've done with it, and I'm hearing really great things about it. So I'm anxious when I get back into things to look at them again.
Yeah, I know I'm very impressed from attending the Customer Con conference. I'm impressed with that Jeff and Dana, that whole team, Kaylee.
Yeah, they're all really great to work with. I've been in the business over 20 years. I've also always been with Reference Edge at almost everywhere I've ever been. With any enterprise company I've been with, I've used Reference Edge, but I liked Slap 5 for the video testimonials and being able to easily capture that. I think Reference Edge probably has a little bit more power behind it as far as reference tracking, but again, I haven't seen Slap 5 in a long time, so it could be really good. Well.
Yes, I haven't seen the full capabilities either. But I was, like I said, we adopted Reference Edge at Teradata, and that's what we're using now. And I've had very, good luck with it, reporting especially. So I think
to me, they're kind of two different platforms in some ways, but
yeah.
It depends on what your needs are.
I was going to take Val strategies. That's exactly what I was going to use that as a Trojan horse. So say it's a reference management system, but then grow it into a advocacy program.
how is your internal, how are things with your sales and customer success teams? Are they on board with starting and using a new tool?
That's funny you should ask. So it's been a whole thing. I've worked at my company for 5 months now, and I've been trying to put together official reference program for this entire time. And nobody wants to own it. So basically CSM says, we don't have any OKRs tied to revenue. So we don't need to worry about this. And then sales says, well, CSMs had the closer relationship with their customers. So they need to own it, not us. So nobody wants to own it, but they all feel the pain of not having a system.
Yeah, that could be a good thing. I feel like a lot of the issue once we get a tool and get started is, once you've got it onboarded and, you know what's going on and you're going to run the whole program, it's getting those other teams on board and not even on board with the idea of having a new program, but how do you use it, changing the habits and the processes that they already have in place, and constantly reminding them becomes a bigger part of the whole process. So my experience with Reference Edge was we were probably a good 6 months in before we were really starting to see some traction. But that is actually pretty on par with what I had for our Influitive program as well. There's just a lot to the tools. And then once that's there, a lot to working with the other teams. That's my experience. And kind of what I've heard from other people, but I can always direct you in different areas. Daniel Pele, who's at Grafana Labs, he said he's used Reference Edge for 8 years.
Yeah, and I was very much in that same boat, Mary, the first time I used it at Elastic. I think I reintroduced it about 7 times. And it's one of those things where I didn't know what I was doing to begin with. And so the best part about doing this program a second time, I knew exactly how not to screw up, at least the same way. And so we actually I started January 19th of 2021, and by May 3rd, we had launched Reference Edge and launched it to the entire sales organization, gotten buy-in and gotten people to use it. And we've been running with it ever since. The trick that I found is spoon feed them as much short form enablement content as possible to begin with. So I spent a lot of that time actually recording demos that are on our internal wiki that if somebody has asked, how do I find something? I'm like, here's a 3-minute video, just watch it. But at the same time, we got time and we spent a lot of time talking to our sales leadership and our sales enablement leadership and said, hey, this is a reason why we need your team's time, because we're only a team of 1 or 2. We can't answer all these questions all the time in order to get your team what they need. So let us help empower them right away. And so we were very key of like, this is why we're doing it. And we got buy-in from it. And now we get very few questions about like, do we have a reference for this? Because people go to there first.
That's awesome. That's honestly, I talk to people, different people that I meet in customer marketing every week, except the last 2 weeks because I was out for the holidays. But that's the biggest issue is, you know what, they got the tool in place finally, they have the job, they're working on this advocacy or reference type of goals, and then they think they're ready to go and they find out, holy crap, there's a whole bunch of change management I now have to do as part of my job. And how do I do that? Where do I learn that? And that's calls like this, where Daniel just shared all of that. I'll probably quote him in the future because that it's changing habits. Like I was saying with building communities, a lot of it is like changing habits, building habits, getting people to come back to the programs that you already have and things like that. And part of that is showing up repeatedly, getting in front of them and being there when they have a question. And that makes a huge difference with your success. Yes, Maria, that's Richard Millington.
Anybody else wants to use that link, and I thank you for passing that along. It looks like there's some good information out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I followed him for about 8 years, taken most of his courses, and I am a Richard Millington Fever Bee geek. So if you have any questions or you can't find anything, I'm happy to help.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing I would add on to that, Justine, is we made sure to, if you have like a regular onboarding boot camp or an onboarding learning path that your sales team has to go through, we make sure that our material is included in that, so they know that it's important enough to know Reference Edge and to know our team that it is key to their onboarding. So obviously it must be key to their success at the company.
Yeah.
So the earlier you can get in front of them, even if it's during their onboarding where they don't know much, they're like, okay, cool, Reference Edge, that sticks out.
I have another
Yeah,
question.
Allison Bukowski did a call on that with someone just a while back on her Perspectives calls, where they were doing that right in the beginning of new people joining the teams. They were learning about the advocacy programs too.
Yeah, we did that too with our, again, at Teradata with our executive briefing center and our advocacy program, since it was under the same umbrella. And then I would like email new hires, kind of an introductory message, and I would actually offer them business hours that they could choose to join every month. So it's smaller groups. We did do the larger in-person sessions, but ever since COVID, they may have gone back to them now, but they stopped the in-person sessions. So this allowed us to still educate everyone on a monthly basis in kind of smaller groups as well.
I was wondering,
Go ahead.
so I was talking about how CSMs don't want to take it over, sales don't want to own it. And of course, there's customer marketing, which this should be part of, but my main focus is on expansion programs. I'm wondering how much of a time suck is managing a reference program. It seems like it's going to take up all my time if I take it over.
It can. It depends on how big your company is and how big your program, like how many people have already been references, how many references your sales team needs. But Maria probably has some suggestions there too.
Yeah, I mean, references are obviously a large part of our work. I mean, right now we are not getting as many references. And as we started doing the one-to-many calls and one-to-few calls at Teradata, that helped alleviate some of the one-to-one references. But I had a staff Well, for the first 10 years or so, like I had a staff of 2 people who would handle kind of the sales request, and then we would all split the marketing. Like I stayed in touch with media and analyst. And then there were other marketing requests that came in. And then when I left, there was just one person managing all the sales references, and both of us were managing the marketing references. But again, we were seasoned people, so that makes a difference too. Is if you have, you know the products, the solutions, and everything, so you understand what customers can do it. The key there is, again, like as I tell, my team now, like in Reference Edge, we just went through where we looked at all the advocates, and I said we need to get the profiles up to date. And I don't necessarily, I don't want to say I don't care. It's not as important to me what they've completely purchased as what they're agreeing to reference now. Because just because they purchased something doesn't mean they're ready to reference. And you want to be able to, when you get a reference request, be able to respond to it quickly and say, yes, these are the 5 companies that can reference it. Which one would you like us to schedule a call or calls with? So you can react quickly and be efficient. Plus, it helps you send those relevant requests to your customers. But I mean, I think, to me, I love the reference part of it, because I think that's where you see the revenue generation, and you can tie it back to sales too. And then you get more budget for your company, and you escalate that to, the higher ups in your quarterly reviews. We influenced this many new logos. We influenced X amount of total contract value or ARR growth. Like if you can track all of that, then that's, I think, the beauty of being able to say you manage the references.
Maria, how many daily requests for references do you average in your program?
I mean, in the program now, I would say it's maybe 3 to 5 a week. Again, it's not, because there's a lot of salespeople doing their own references.
Gotcha.
They're going through what we call their little black books. But once we launch our reference program, that's my goal. Today, it's kind of like the salespeople are handling their own references. They come to my team occasionally, and then it's very BU driven here. So we have a lot of the solutions marketing teams handling their own references too. And that's our goal, is there's too many people handling references and they're not being tracked. And we need to all have that centralized in one place. And that's what my team is here to do. So it's just taking that time to get everyone on board internally, and kind of building that community internally that everyone supports it. And then, getting the advocates externally. So it's just a lot of work. It's been a lot of work to do. Like I said, I thought, gosh, I'm almost on month 7 next week, and I thought I would just come in and be able to, get it underway, launch a program pretty quickly. But it's just taken more work than I thought.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I have a couple of customers that I work with, and I'm like, I wish this could move so much faster. Like if people could just get out of my way and let me do what I need to do. And I keep thinking, how could I expedite this? One, I'm never talking to brand again. Just no. I don't care what I have to do for a website. I will make it out of paper clips and pencils.
Well, and that's part of the reason, when we came in, kind of the charter that I was told to lead is different than when my CMO came in, which I was glad, but we also had internally had to come up with a name of the program, and our internal team was working on it. And I was like, this is not what we should go forward with. And he took a look at it and he was like, yeah, stop. Stop. We need to, pivot. So I was happy with that. It's taken a lot more repivoting than I had initially hoped for, but that's okay. Like I said, there are great people here. I think the difference is there's not been a reference program here for 5 years. So it's a new way of thinking, and again, changing, and making sure everyone's kind of bought in and we're all collaborating and partnering together. So it seems like a win-win on their part too, because it should be my goal is to get them to do less work with the references. My team should be handling that. That should be our value, and alleviating some of their pain and tracking that information too.
Absolutely. I see a lot of people are jumping off, so if anybody needs to go ahead. And I just want to thank everybody for hopping on in the new year and participating and asking questions and answering. And I'll see some of you next week.
Thanks, Mary. These calls
Um,
are always very insightful, and it feels good to like have this group that shares openly and everything. Always learn.
Yeah, thank you for getting on and sharing. And if you want to talk more about community, I'm always open to it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Mary. Bye,
Bye,
guys.
Everyone, have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
You too.